Olarambal jate vartor narvode in Mandoa, or in English, welcome and good morning, my brothers and sisters. I'm Udesla Jorir. I am the co-founder of the Way of The Mandalore Religious Movement. We are a registered domestic nonprofit in the state of Ohio. Our federal 509A1 status is still pending. Before we begin today, I have to make it clear that local laws may vary, and neither I, nor the admins, nor the council members, nor the Armorers Guild members are lawyers, and nothing in this or any other message or social media post is to be taken as legal advice. Disclaimer over. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to our second overall sermon message and our first in a series covering the 12 Core Tenets of the Way of The Mandalore. In our last video, we gave a brief overview of the 12 Core Tenets and explained how they differed from the fictional lore. Today we'll be going more in-depth into the first of the 12. Number 1. Remain armed. A Mandalorian must be armed with a firearm whenever physically possible. Out of respect for the rights of private property owners, such weapons should remain discreet and concealed whenever possible, unless their use is needed to protect innocent life or property. Now, what does this mean? Well, for starters, it means that at all times a Mandalorian must follow the 4 basic rules of firearm safety. These are long held and established and good rules to follow no matter how proficient you are with your firearms, and they are: Number 1, treat all firearms as if they are loaded. Number 2, never point a firearm at any object or person you are not willing to destroy. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to discharge the firearm. And number 4, always be sure of your target and what is behind your target. The what is behind your target often gets overlooked. Now, what about in training? Of course, certain training exercises may circumvent some of these rules, such as practicing draw and dry fire, or when doing retention or disarming drills. But regardless of the circumstances, a Mandalorian must do everything they can to never put the lives of an innocent person in danger. Now, physically possible. Physically possible means exactly that. It does not mean only when it is easy to do so. In specific situations, such as wearing a gi or another uniform when practicing martial arts, where it's not physically possible to carry a firearm because there's no way to secure it because of the gi or uniform, in those specific training situations, there is no sin in carrying a knife or another weapon, as all weapons carry a spirit. We'll cover that in a bit. That said, a Mandalorian must practice those trainings and techniques while carrying a firearm whenever possible, when training with other Mandalorians, for example. What about your job? Well, some people have expressed concern or asked questions about their specific jobs. And some jobs and careers do not make it physically possible to carry a firearm while working. If your certain job involves working at height with straps or harnesses, or involves strong magnets, or something similar, really that creates a condition that makes it not only physically impossible, but also unsafe to carry a firearm, there's no sin in carrying a knife or a tactical pen or another weapon, something that isn't as dangerous due to the physical limits of the job. The physical limits of the job. And it is up to the individual Mandalorian to determine whether or not they can carry a firearm while on their job. Now, this next point might ruffle some feathers for some people listening. Some careers may preclude a Mandalorian from carrying any weapon of any kind while at work due to company policies that do not make allowances for religious rights. One who seeks to keep the way of the Mandalore must be prepared to choose whether such a company's policies oppose their ability to actively live as a keeper of the way. When can I be unarmed and still in public? There is no sin in a Mandalorian being disarmed for the purpose of medical treatment, such as an MRI or emergency medical care. In strict scenarios such as this, where no weapon may be practically carried, a Mandalorian must observe the proper procedure for disarming and rearming, if physically possible. If you're unconscious, obviously there is no sin in not following the ceremony. This involves thanking the spirit of the weapon and asking for its continued guidance and assistance, as well as proper storage and handling to ensure the proper respect for the weapon and its spirit. What weapons are covered under the first tenet? Firearms are first and foremost holy and sacred to us, but all weapons, including those you're not carrying, have a spirit of their own. They walk with us and help to protect us and the innocent. This doesn't just apply to the weapon itself, though. In the context of firearms, which are the most holy and sacred to us, it also extends to ammunition, ammunition carrying devices, and all internal mechanics. A firearm magazine, clip, ammunition, and mechanisms are all part of the firearm in the same way that an arm or a leg or even a single cell is part of the body. Augmentation of firearms will be addressed at a later time, but there is no sin regarding the cyclic rate or magazine capacity or any other augmentation of any given firearm owned by a keeper of the way, provided they are kept in keeping with the way. Included in this is the making and or forging of firearms and accessories. The spirit of the weapon enters the weapon at the instant construction or manufacturing or forging begins. Disarming in public. What if I have to use my firearm? This question comes up a lot. How do we handle it? Firstly, a Mandalorian must, to the best of their individual ability, never be forcefully disarmed. This does not include situations where a Mandalorian has had to use their weapon in self-defense. In such case, that weapon may become evidence and may be surrendered to the authorities without sin after the event, but every step afterwards must be taken to ensure that the weapon is treated as a holy artifact and with the utmost respect during any investigation. And at all times, the weapon must be treated with the respect due the spirit of that artifact. The weapon must be returned to the Mandalorian in the same or better condition at a ceremony, again, to be addressed later. This does not apply to any weapons or armor other than those used directly in the hypothetical event, meaning that no other firearms or armor are to be taken or surrendered. Should the situation arise and a Mandalorian's weapon be surrendered as evidence, all effort must be made by the Mandalorian to rearm as soon as possible. Now, what does it mean to be alone? Being alone means either that the Mandalorian is physically alone or with members of their family, with spouse, with children, with close friends, etc. The time to be alone means it's their time to be at peace and not always on guard. It doesn't just mean their proximity to other people. Now, while it is highly recommended that a Mandalorian remain armed even while it is alone, it is no sin not to be. At all times, though, the Mandalorian must be prepared and ready to arm themselves. By now, many of you are aware of the famous line from the show. We covered it in the last video. I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are part of my religion. Now, that is very true for us and who we are. More detail will be added at a later date when we cover Tenet 5. But for now, we need to address exactly what that line means. While this is the first tenet, and it is the first for a reason, we have to remember that while weapons are a part of our religion, they are not the entirety of it. And that's a point that is all too easily forgotten, even among keepers, but especially to those outside. People outside of the way, they look at us and they see a lot of focus on firearms, and they think that's all we are. It is not. Firearms are a part of our religion. They are not the entirety of it. Weapons in general, and firearms specifically, make up a large portion of posts and discussions within the community across social media and even in person, and of course they do. Not that there isn't a good reason for that. Again, it's number one, and it's number one for a reason. Of course we're going to discuss weapons and firearms. Other than being the first tenet, it's also one of the easiest things to get people to talk about. What their personal preferences are, what spirit speaks to them, what system that they feel most comfortable with, and that's the spirit speaking to them. But people outside, if that's all they see us doing, they're going to think that weapons are our religion, and they're not. They are a part of it. To those people on the periphery, to those people who are just curious, the people who want to pick and choose, want to cherry pick from a religion, and to those people who have already decided against us, who have already decided without knowing us and knowing who we are and what we believe. This message is for all of you. You cannot just strap on a firearm and call yourself a Mandalorian. And we, as keepers of the way, every day, sometimes it seems, we need to make sure that we never give the impression that it's that simple. Keeping the way is more than just our firearms. That closes out our brief message on the first tenet of the Way of the Mandalore: remain armed. We hope you learned something more about who we are and what we believe, and more information can be found on the Facebook page by searching for, quote, The Way of the Mandalore, the Mandalorian Religious Movement. We are also on MeWe and have a limited Twitter presence. Links are in the description. Please give us a like and a follow if you're interested in learning more about us and our faith. And please donate to the Patreon if you are so inclined. It helps us to continue to bring these multimedia messages to you and to others, and to reach people who maybe haven't heard of us. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them in the future videos or social media posts. Special thanks and a shout out to Adrian for becoming the first to support us on Patreon. Thank you, Vod. We appreciate it. Until next time, Vode, Vorentje Mandoade, Balkoyer Marutik Ibik Runi. Thank you, brothers and sisters, and be safe. This is the way.